Here's how every map starts out. You put on the Skull's Bridal Helmet. You have Lockless Roar Charm on, always. You keep that Lockless Roar Charm on. Then you use a spell. I'm using Voltaic Mark, which triggers damage on me because of Skull's Bridal. I have, in my secondary weapon set, I have the passive Catalysis allocated, which makes that I have a chance of taking elemental damage from physical damage. So I take some physical damage from casting Voltaic Mark due to the Skull's Bridal Helmet. Eventually that lightning damage will trigger my Blockless Roar Charm, which gives me a Frenzy Charge. And then with that Frenzy Charge I use Whirlwind Lance. The Frenzy Charge makes Whirlwind Lance's AoE bigger. So this is just an optional step if you want to make the Whirlwind Lance really big. Which I do. So I do that, and then I put on Prism of... then I use Whirling Slash a couple times. Snapshot that big AoE from the Whirlwind Lance. Then I put on the Crown of the Victor helmet like I showed, and the Fire Flower Amulet. Both those make my Incinerate's level much higher, which increases the damage of the Ignited Ground a ton. And then we stick that giant, really powerful Incinerate into our Whirlwind by using Incinerate until it makes Ignited Ground. Then that Ignited Ground gets sucked into the Whirlwind, and then we can just carry that around for the rest of the map with our Whirling Slash.
Immeasurably beautiful.
So we do all that prep at the beginning because whatever we do, whatever damage we're adding to our Incinerate, it gets carried with us for the rest of the entire map. Because we stick that in our Whirlwind, and the Whirlwind never expires. As long as we're moving around with it, as long as we're staying within the borders of the Whirlwind, it keeps that Ignited Ground for the rest of the map. So we can stack up our Ignite power with those two item swaps, the Crown of the Victor and Fire Flower, and make the Ignited Ground super powerful, and then carry that with us to the map, for the rest of the map. In my first video, I talked about using Dodri's Tenure Gloves and Crackle Creep Rings to also increase the damage before doing Incinerate. But after some more testing, I've determined that those are not actually working for damage, not increasing the damage. But the Crown of the Victor and Fire Flower definitely are increasing the damage. So those are now the only ones I do, the only item swaps I do before Incinerate. And then I'm also doing that optional Skull's Bridal Helmets to get a bigger AoE. The AoE from the Whirlwind Lance is really big because it has 3 support gems in there that increase the AoE size. You've got Expanse, Reach, and Magnified Effect. So the Whirlwind Lance is huge, and then when you use Whirling Slash within that Whirlwind Lance's effect, the Whirling Slash basically takes on the size of Whirlwind Lance. So we're sort of snapshotting the AoE from that Whirlwind Lance as well. The secondary wand weapon set is a wand with fire spell skills, gain damages fire, spell damage, and fire damage on there, and then it has a Sun Splinter buckler with +4 to level of fire spell or fire skills, and those are all also getting snapshotted when you cast Incinerate. So when you're casting Incinerate, you have to make sure that you are only letting Incinerate be used on your secondary weapon set. One that has the wand and the Sun Splinter, to make sure that it's actually doing damage. If you cast Incinerate with your Spear weapon set, it's going to do basically no damage. So yeah, you have to make sure you're not accidentally doing that, which I've done before by accident, so just watch out for that. I showed Sandspit at the beginning of the video, because it's like the best map for this build. It's totally open, there's nothing you can get stuck on, there's no rocks and stuff. You just fly through the map really fast. The previous map was Mire, and I wanted to show that one too because that's one of the worst maps of this build, because there's so many narrow, windy trails and paths, and it's very easy to get stuck on stuff there. So I wanted to show you what the build looks like on even sort of the worst map possible, just to give you a better sense of how the build feels. Even there, though, again, to me it didn't feel that bad, and it's something you can get better at with practice. I have only played this build for still only like 8 or 9 hours, so I'm definitely still a beginner at actually playing the build, and it's going to be easier for you to get better at that than me. Like, better at not getting stuck on stuff and things like that. That just takes some practice. The build's pretty tanky because it uses Mind over Matter, and it stacks both Strength and Int. So it has 2 pools to add to the total health pool, essentially. The build can use Mind over Matter because it basically doesn't use mana. I'm using a level 1 or a level 2 Whirling Slash, which only costs 6 mana to use. And all the damage is from Incinerate's Ignited Ground, being in the Whirlwind. Whirling Slash itself doesn't do damage. It's all from the Ignited Ground at the very beginning of the map that we used. The build also has Evasion and Block Chance, and Evasion is scaled up even more than it seems to be because enemies in the Whirlwind are blinded, so they have less accuracy, making our evasion more effective. So it actually has pretty good avoidance and a fairly large health pool. I show my gear in the build guide. I could be way stronger than what I'm showing. I have a +2 Prism of Belief for Incinerate and a +4 Fire Flower and a level 19 Incinerate Gem. If I had a +6 Fire Flower, which is the highest you get, and a +3 Prism of Belief for Incinerate, and maybe a level 20 gem, and possibly even a corrupted level 21 gem, you can get all the way up to level 40 Incinerate, which would be doing way more damage than I'm doing right now. And I've only tried T3 Zeshed out so far, but you saw it died fairly quickly. With just a few more upgrades, a T4 Zeshed would be a very fast kill. And even now I probably could do a T4 Zeshed, I just haven't tried. Another build with pretty quick clear is a Flicker Strike, but I think this is probably faster clearing than that because one thing, Flicker Strike can be pretty inconsistent because it requires a bunch of monster density in order to chain across screens. But also it has basically 0 ability to backtrack and like pick up any loot that dropped, or if you ran past a rare earlier on in the map, it's hard to backtrack and get to that area again because you don't really move quickly on a Flicker Strike build. Just if you're just running. If there's no enemies to run to attack, then you just sort of slowly walk through the map. So I think this is probably faster than Flicker Strike too, for clearing. This build has really great speed for backtracking as necessary. I'm stacking accuracy with the Lycosidé Shield and War Banner to get increased attack speed from the Falcon Dive passive, so that holding down Whirling Slash makes me move really fast. I use the Fallen Formation chest armor, which makes it that banners are always at max valor, so I can use it whenever I want to always have that banner buff on, which gives me all that accuracy to go really fast. I have a passive that makes it so that when I leave the banner's AoE, I still keep the banner buff for 4 seconds. So the banner buff lasts 4 seconds, then I place the banner again. Placing the banner takes 1 second, and increases my speed by 93% when the buff is on, which is huge. So 1 out of every 5 seconds I'm not moving because I'm placing the banner. And the other 4 seconds I'm moving at 93% increased speed due to all the accuracy that the War Banner is giving, which means that on average I cover 54% more distance due to this banner strategy. So it's really, really powerful. The banner also gives me 51% to all elemental resists, so it makes it really easy to get res capped, and let's make it cheaper gear because of that. I have a passive that makes it that the banner adds elemental resists. Most of the power from this build is coming from jewels, because jewels are so good for this build. Jewels can have increased ignite magnitude, increased spell damage, damaging ailments deal damage faster, all on the same jewel. And those are all mods that are fairly difficult to get on the passive tree. Stacking them up from jewels is really, really effective. Better jewels means a lot more damage. The jewels I bought were generally less than a divine each. There were many other better jewels out there for the build that just cost a lot more than like 1 div, so I didn't get those. It's good to have at least 1 jewel that recovers 2% of mana on kill, just to keep mana topped up for your Mind over Matter mana pool. The build is pretty flexible for both tankiness and speed. So if you want to be tankier, you can change your attributes passives from Dexterity to Strength or Int at the cost of speed. You really want both Strength and Int to be like balanced, because we've got the Jack of all trades passive at the bottom of the passive tree, which makes that your lowest attribute makes you do more damage. So you want to keep Strength and Int at equal levels. And if you wanted to be faster, you could lower Strength and Int and raise your Dex at the cost of tankiness. So it's really up to you how you want to balance the tankiness and speed aspect. You can be extremely tanky and not as fast, or insanely fast and still pretty tanky but not crazy tanky. My Beast Companion has the mod All Damage Shocks, which I just have to shock bosses and do more damage to bosses. I further scaled that shock with the overcharge support on the companion. I've got Voltaic Mark also on the casting on the boss to increase that shock further. All the damage the build does is chaos damage due to the black flame rings, which makes ignited enemies take chaos damage. Fire resist on enemies doesn't lower our damage, only chaos resist does that. So I use despair on bosses to make them take more damage. I've heard that in Expedition, if you take a mod with enemies are immune to fire damage, that still makes it so that they can't be ignited and won't take damage from our ignite. I haven't tested that myself, but you may want to avoid that mod in Expedition. Elevation changes on maps can be an issue sometimes because the whirlwind only affects mobs that are near your elevation. But if you move your whirlwind around a bunch and get closer to the enemy, they should eventually be at the right elevation and get ignited and die. If you go into a map that has ignited, shocked, or chilled ground, you have to find a spot with none of that ground to lay down your initial whirlwind. Otherwise that effect gets sucked into your whirlwind and you can't put your ignited ground into it. So far in all maps I've run with ground effects, they've never been in the very starting area of the map, and I've been able to put down ignited ground into my whirlwind just fine at the beginning of the map. Once you've got your incinerates ignited ground in the whirlwind, then going over any other ground effects won't change anything. You'll still keep your strong ignited ground in your whirlwind. The build feels especially nice in places where enemies are spawning in a certain location, like breaches and expeditions, and strong boxes and rituals. You can sit right on top of where the enemies are spawning, and they die almost instantly from the aura, before they have a chance to do anything at all, which feels great.